How you doing, buddy?
Good, Christian.
Good to see you, Christian.
I feel like everything is right in the world. Everything is as it should be. With your haircut, my recent haircut, now I just need my beard to be like 3 inches longer.
With our powers combined, we become Captain Planet. Do you remember that show at all?
You know, even as a kid, I'm like, this feels
dumb.
very indoctrinating.
This mullet-wearing spandex superhero like comes out of the ground because pollution is too high.
Yeah, it's even back then. I'm like, it feels like I'm, I don't know. It's felt very indoctrinating.
To all our listeners, that was a cartoon from like I think the late '80s, early '90s. Yeah, and it was this superhero, a team of regular people that had like specialized rings, and when their powers combined, this spandex mullet wearing guy, comes exploding out of the ground.
Yeah, saving the dolphins and the whales.
He was taking pollution down to zero.
Yeah, too bad he didn't know about carbon credits yet. He could have gamed the system.
I wonder if Captain Planet would have been a Democrat. Nah,
yeah.
He's on the side of Mother Nature, people. At any rate, I'm not drinking...
yes, you are. You got something right there?
Whiskey today. Let me finish my sentence.
Smells delicious.
Oh. I am taking a break, at least from whiskey for today, or alcoholic beverages. I'm going to enjoy a coffee and a cigar, which I don't do very often.
Yeah, it's very fitting with your cardigan or whatever that sweater is.
Shawl sweater.
Your shawl sweater.
Swole.
Get swole in your swole.
I'm dressed up, to all our listeners, I'm dressed up very, like, kind of therapist.
Yeah, very therapeutic.
I'm playing a therapist in real life today.
I feel calm just sitting in your presence.
How do you feel people would respond to me smoking a cigar in my actual therapist office?
I think it'd be awesome. You'd have to rebrand your therapist office as old-fashioned dad therapy.
I like that idea.
Yes.
I like that idea. Well, we've got a topic at hand that needs to be discussed. Whiskey to consume, tobacco to put in our bodies, because I believe in bodily autonomy, and I'm going to put this in my body.
All right, then.
So, with that said, let's roll. We are the Old Fashioned Dad Podcast, seeking to love dads and men through the person and work of Jesus Christ, while entering into tough conversations on marriage, mental health, sex, and parenting, all while sipping good whiskey.
Then we're back!
Hey!
Hey, what are we drinking? What am I drinking today?
You are drinking a whiskey that is Mesquite finished.
Dalbec.
Out of Arizona.
Or Baldac? Oh, Dalbec. Delbec.
Baldac.
I like that name better.
Do you have Lexic-Discia?
Well, this is, tastes like I'm drinking a campfire. Mesquite smoky.
If I remember right, I had a little bit last night. It kind of reminded me of a single malt scotch.
Right.
A little bit.
But it's not, it doesn't have the peatiness, so it's tolerable.
Yeah.
In my book.
Doesn't taste like burning.
Yeah. Doesn't taste
like
burning moss.
So we kind of tossed around a couple of ideas.
We did.
Sorry, what was, the cigars? What are we smoking? Because all our viewers really love to know what we're smoking.
Yeah, they really care.
Yeah.
It's a Thompson. Well, provided by Thompson. So, Independica.
Independica.
Yeah, which is very appropriate for our topic today. Independence. America.
America. Well, it's tasty. It seems to be going with my coffee.
Yes, indeed.
So I'm very appreciative of you sharing your wares, your cigar with me. Thank you. Well, we tossed around a couple of ideas, right, for this particular episode, and there's been a lot of news right out there. A lot of headbanging is not the right word, but hair grabbing and pulling around the issue of censorship,
hand clutching,
hand wringing. There it is, hand wringing.
Yes.
Censorship, free speech.
The pesky First Amendment.
Yeah. Have you heard a couple of things that are out there right now?
No, everything in my news feed is super consistent. It's almost like my news medium is being censored, so I only see one side of things. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Huh? Weird. I must be living on a different planet then, because my news feed is super inconsistent.
Everything I agree with has a warning on it. It's something about COVID and misinformation.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know. It's weird.
Right. Well, this has kind of been a big deal this last couple of weeks. We had, if any of you aren't living under a rock, I don't know if simply saying his name is a microaggression, but I'll say his name.
I'll probably get censored because of it.
Yeah, Joe Rogan.
Whoa.
You're familiar with Joe Rogan?
I like the Joe.
Yeah, Joe Rogan. For those of you, again, that are living under a rock and somehow listen to our podcast, but not his.
That would be weird.
He is like probably the number one podcaster in the world.
Yeah, he's a grandfather of podcasters.
Yeah, I actually don't know of any other podcasters that came before him.
Tim Ferriss is pretty early on too.
I said that in jest, but I appreciate that you took it seriously.
Sorry, it was a rhetorical question.
But all other podcasters before Rogan doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, there we go. But he's in the news because he's, lots of people are trying to censor him.
Yeah, he stepped out of line with the acceptable narrative, and can't have that.
Well, most specifically, he was, I believe in an episode, he used a derogatory word, right? But he wasn't using it in a racist sense.
Sure.
He was literally pulling it from a quote.
Right. Wait.
Oh, sorry.
How has the book he's quoting not been censored already? We have to rewrite history to fit into what we accept morally acceptable nowadays.
Oh, what is even morally acceptable nowadays?
Not much.
It seems like...
I mean, you could be totally shitty towards your common neighbor, but you better not,
It seems like the goalposts are constantly moving on what's morally acceptable, and who defines what's morally acceptable?
Yeah, well, I mean, if moral acceptability continues to change on a week-by-week basis, maybe it's not morality. Maybe it's something made up.
Morality
Just
seems...
calling it ethics.
For some reason, I didn't think morality was driven by emotions, but it seems to be.
Oh, incredibly.
Seems to be.
Rewritten every week.
On the topic of what's approved and what's not approved, I've, in an effort to be a better dad and educate my kids, I've started reading to my youngest at night, trying to be consistent about it, and I chose the book To Kill a Mockingbird.
Okay.
And I haven't read that. I haven't read that book.
Non-socially acceptable things in it nowadays.
Pretty much all of the book.
Yeah.
If you were to, kind of look at it through a lens of cancel culture, but I.
But if you looked at it historically, it totally makes sense.
Well, from a historical sense, yeah, absolutely. It's a kind of a time capsule of what, because I think it's Harper Lee that wrote it back in like the 1950s or something like that, and it was set during like. Post-depression or like the midst of depression.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. And at any rate, there was, a number of terms and words and instances that, you read the book and my daughter's like, well, what does that mean? And I'm having to explain things, but, through a modern day cultural lens. And I was like, these are things that we can't really talk about. These are things that we can't really, mention or can't really say because, you'll be looked at, canceled, you'll be viewed as a racist.
Sure.
Yeah. So we've got, I thought it might be appropriate to talk about as much as we can, dip our toes. I like dipping toes.
The icy bath.
Yeah. The frigid death waters of this First Amendment, freedom of speech, cancel culture. And
it's overrated.
So we should cancel culture?
No, you should cancel First Amendment.
Get rid of it.
I had some Canadian friends back in my 20s before I wisened up. And I remember specifically having a conversation with them. They're like, you Americans, speaking of, United States of America, because technically they're Americans too, but whatever.
True, North Americans.
North America.
There you go.
Literally said to me, you Americans take your freedoms and your freedom of speech so seriously. What's the big deal? I was like, it's easy to say when you have all the benefits of it. Which kind of goes hand in hand with, like what we're experiencing with cancel culture and like the rabid left and stuff like that doesn't happen in countries except ones that are incredibly prosperous thanks to capitalism. And then those people attack the very thing that gives them the lifestyle and freedom that they have.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's kind of a great irony,
And I think that is actually, I was going to say that's ironic because I wonder what your Canadian friends would say nowadays, especially with what's going on up in Ottawa.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Trudeau thinks that, that there's unacceptable speech. Gotta get rid of it.
So we have this thing, you know, it's like one of the foundations of our Constitution. It's referenced more times, I think, that this particular amendment is referenced more than, I don't know, the rest of the amendments.
I don't think it's accidental that it's the First Amendment. I mean, without it, you can't really have a thriving democracy, or in our case, a constitutional republic, because we don't have a democracy.
Right.
And the Founding Fathers very intentionally made sure we did not have a democracy, but that's another episode.
That is another. And
read the Federalist Papers if you want to know why.
We're going to have to do an episode on the Federalist Papers, because you've brought that up a number of times.
It blew my mind when I read it, because it's literally the opposite of what everyone tells you the Constitution's about. Like this idea it's like a living document, and we were in democracy. Like the Founding Fathers, you know, Jefferson specifically, was like, no, we're not. And here's the dangers of democracy.
So how do we, I guess, like our goal, we're just, again, two Christian dads sitting in a backyard in Podunk, Pacific Northwest, Burien.
Yeah. Burien.
B-Town. But we're Christians nonetheless. You know, do we believe in...
Twice over.
Yeah, that is. So Christian 4 to the fourth power?
Squared.
You're Christian too, I'm Christian too.
Yeah.
Anywho. But we're Christians. I mean, how do we engage in this conversation of First Amendment rights? Because to me it feels like there's a lot of things in this world that have kind of run amok.
Sure.
And I don't think the First Amendment has been able to, escape that. I think that there's plenty of First Amendment stuff that's kind of run amok.
Sure.
But I mean, what are some of your just kind of high level, cursory glance viewpoints when thinking about, like, well, how do Christians engage in this particular topic? Because it is pretty relevant.
Right. I mean, I think it's nuanced. I mean, I think there's some foundational truths when it comes to freedom of speech, but as we were kind of talking about beforehand, it has its limitations, and at the end of the day, it's not the gospel. At the end of the day, God calls us something bigger and different than the economy of the world, right? So it's important, but it's also not the... I mean, it might be a hill to die on, but it's not the hill to die on, you know? Yeah. And I say that meaning that, like, you're talking about, like, I'm more concerned with the erosion of it, but the other side of that is the kind of the knee-jerk embracing it, and patriotism and military and government all as kind of this Christian package, which kind of mentioned, like Christian nationalism, or like the flavor of Christianity that, like, I see a little more when I go to the South and visit family. Yeah. Not my family, Chinese family. And it's appealing because, it definitely appeals to my more conservative side, but it's also dangerous because Jesus wasn't a nationalist, for America or Jerusalem or Israel or whatever,
if you want to think about it, even for his own being a Jew,
sure,
he wasn't even. I mean, like, he loved the Jewish people,
right,
but he wasn't for, like, exclusively the Jewish nation.
Right. I mean, that's why us Gentiles were grafted into
the wild olive branch.
Yes. Otherwise, it would just be, Israel that was, the chosen people.
Right.
So I say that as far as a nuance to it. I mean, I think free speech is incredibly important, and it's really concerning, to say the least, the attacks and slippery slope I see people doing, primarily on two levels. I see it. I see it with this idea of we have to regulate and censor misinformation, specifically around the Rona, masks, vaccines, like that kind of stuff. That's like seems to be one very defined area that it's under attack. And I say the other one, remind me what I was saying before we were chatting, and the other...
It escaped my mind.
Yes, the other aspect of that is this idea that, I was saying, when we were kids, in the 80s, 90s, there's the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Where nowadays you got kids on college campuses saying, that words are literally violence. Yeah. This idea that, like, well, first of all, redefining language so that what I say is the same as me stabbing you with a knife, which is crazy, So, I mean, because words, literal has a meaning. And to say that words are literally violence, figurative, sure, that would be accurate. But so kind of those seem like the two eroding pillars of the First Amendment, and this idea that basically people are too fragile to hear things that they don't agree with. That's kind of, that's one aspect of it. And the other one is people are too dumb and shouldn't be allowed to make their own decisions on what's true and what's not true.
That might be a good segue into kind of where I'm heading. The DHS, right? You're familiar with this governmental body, right? I think it's the Department of Human Services or something like that, or Health Services, or
Something like that.
something like that.
Are they part of the Homeland Security or is it a separate entity?
I think, they're connected with Homeland Security, or Homeland Security.
Because that's DHS, right? Yeah. Department of Homeland Security, yeah.
Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah, that's
that makes
what it
more
is.
sense.
So, yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Misinformation, we're censored.
Yeah. We do make mistakes. We are fallible. Recently, within the last 24, 48 hours, I think, released a statement. I'm sure it's buried in their government documents on websites. But I saw a screenshot of it anyways. And it labeled, misinformation as a terrorist threat.
Yeah, which in my experience, anytime a government entity says something like that, whether it's a policy or a law, it's so vague that abuse of it is quickly to follow.
Assuredly going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
It just kind of sets a precedence for, whatever they define in that moment as unacceptable or misinformation. Because it's something you can't. It's one of those laws you can't really prove it. If you say something's incorrect in the court of law, it's going to be really difficult to figure out whether or not you actually believe that, or it's not true, and you're intentionally spreading misinformation.
Well, and so I think that brings up a good point of subject. Go ahead.
I was going to say, thanks. What's Jeremy's? What's his moniker? Is that it? The guy who saw a screenshot. He brought it to my attention.
Oh, Bearded and Opinionated?
Yes, Bearded and Opinionated, yeah. Jeremy?
Yeah, Jeremy.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
Yeah. And if you haven't listened to his episode yet, it's good.
Go do it. It's a really good one.
It's good.
So this brings up this issue. So like when it comes to free speech, objectivity and subjectivity, right? So subjectivity is a lot more of what people engage in. Like, hey, I feel this way, so then this should happen.
Right.
Objectivity is a lot more factually based and not influenced by, say, a personal opinion or something like that.
Sure.
So what we end up having is, like, say, with this DHS labeling, misinformation as terrorism.
Right.
What you have is like, well, okay, so then you guys have created a definition, of what is misinformation.
Sure.
And that could change with the next administration, and if whatever this policy or whatnot stays in effect, it could continue to change from administration to administration. So,
right. Yeah, sorry.
So you're ultimately like, you're getting into this age-old philosophical, theological debate as like, what is true?
Sure. There's a number of routes we could go there. There's the what is truth aspect of it. And you get into, how postmodernism kind of paves the path for where we are now, where it started off with, moving from this idea that there is truth to there is no truth, and you each make your own truth, in which case...
Which is an ultimate truth.
Right. And then, or you could look at the aspect of, whenever you give the government enough power to control the populace of speech, like that's going to be abused. Mm-hmm. And, the people who agree with people in power now are happy. As soon as that flips, they're not going to be happy anymore because, the other side can use it against, them or whatever. And that kind of brings in, like, where does the First Amendment come into this? Like, because the first question when you see something like that is, well, who gets to determine what's acceptable and what's not acceptable?
Yeah. Yeah, who does? And and generally, if I'm right, like government was put in place to protect the rights of people, and the people were supposed to, elect leaders that would be representative of them.
Right. Well, I mean, if you get to the core of like the purpose of government, it's to provide structures so people can flourish. I mean, that's the idea of, and a lot of that is protection. Whether it's military, police, laws. Mm-hmm. It's not to control what the people say and what they do.
Right.
But increasingly we've gone in that direction where there's more and more infringement on what you can do with your own property, with your own words.
Mm-hmm. So I think the place that I constantly come back to with the First Amendment is it was put in place for a reason, right? Like I'm not a student of the First Amendment, but like it was put in place for a reason. Like historically, do you know some of those reasons?
I mean, I could pull something out of my ass, but I'd imagine it had to do with them, because when the Founding Fathers came over here, they were subjects of the Crown, right?
Yeah, King George.
Right. Yeah. They were not Americans. This idea of like them being separate, they were loyal to Britain. And, even before that, the people that came over were escaping religious persecution.
Yeah.
Like they came here so that they could have the right to worship.
Yeah.
And so there's, some of that in the culture. And so what they wanted to establish is like, how can we make sure that the government isn't encroaching upon what we do, how we worship, what we can say, how we live our lives?
Yeah. So that has kind of, I don't know if the authors of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, when they were looking at the First Amendment being the freedom of speech, the right to freedom of speech,
yep.
Considered like, what is that? Larry Flint. There we go. That's what I'm thinking of. Larry Flint. I think he was the creator of Penthouse or Hustler magazine.
Hustler, I think. But
yeah. Where, I mean, it was a landmark trial. Like he won hands down, saying that his business is an expression of freedom of speech, and his freedom of speech is being infringed upon, and he won. And now it's like when you look at freedom of speech, it's there really is nothing that doesn't fit under it nowadays.
Sure. Well, and that's the dark side of it. I mean, anytime you've got freedom, you've got the extremes of that, right?
Yeah.
And because I mean, the boundaries of freedom are, or should be, where the law kicks in is when your freedom starts encroaching on someone else's freedom. Like that's where the law should be. So like, as soon as I start encroaching on your freedom to live, and I try to kill you, or I enslave you, that's different.
Yeah, you don't have a freedom to do that.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so I mean that's the dark side. Like we don't in America, there's an understanding that we don't have the freedom of not being offended, and pornography could fit into that. Now, granted, there's restrictions on that, which is why you don't see it on the front rack of a grocery store anymore. So there's the protection of the innocent, and not forcing people to see or hear things they don't want to, and that's different. And that's really the foundation of freedom of speech. Like, if I'm online, I don't like what someone's saying, I just don't read it.
Yeah.
Like if someone's saying something I don't like, I walk away.
Yeah. But what do you do with like, say, big tech companies who are like, they're not dealing with like hardcore pornographic stuff they allow it out there.
Sure.
And you're right. Like magazine racks. I remember growing up, like you'd walk past the grocery store and there'd be the normal fashion magazines, and then there'd be like the ones that are covered in the back by black. And I was like, well, what are those magazines? And my mom's like, keep walking. And but nowadays, like, I mean, who even looks at a magazine anymore? Like you've got a treasure trove, or a pit, let's call it that.
Sure.
A pit, an endless, bottomless pit of sexual pornographic content that's available via the internet, via your smartphone.
Sure.
And I mean, so like, what do we do with that? Because it's protected. under the freedom of speech.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's not really my expertise.
Sure. So, and I think maybe that's what I'm trying to get at with this conversation. We're not gonna solve it, obviously.
I mean, we
Dang it,
try
I
to
thought we
solve
might.
something in every episode.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
How to be a better dad.
It's a big life quandary.
Yeah. So, freedom of speech is a big issue, and there's good. I mean, would you agree that there's good speech and then there's bad speech?
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's, as Christians, I mean, we've done an episode on this, when we felt convicted over cussing. It's basically, let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, so, and that's what we're trying to, I don't know either. And that's what we're trying to teach our son, like focus on the things that are good. They help people build up and they feel good, and, focus on the beauty, like don't focus on the darkness and the destruction and violence and, that kind of stuff. So I mean, I think kind of getting back to the idea of like the First Amendment. I mean, I think they made it very intentionally the First Amendment because the rest of the Bill of Rights don't work without it. You can't have freedom of press. You can't have freedom of religion. Like if someone's telling you what is acceptable and what's not acceptable for words that come out of your mouth, you get Canada, and then you get Germany,
And other totalitarian.
Yeah, and then you get Russia and China, I mean, it's a slippery slope as soon as they start saying this is acceptable, this isn't acceptable.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think, reflecting upon, I do think it is a beautiful thing, the First Amendment, that, that we have, because like, especially as Christians, we want to share the good news. I mean, and like China, it's a punishable, jailable offense, and sometimes results in death to share the gospel of Christ. That's why most of their churches are all underground, and they encourage people to rat out their neighbors and whatnot. Sure. And so, like when I think about freedom of speech, which I have been forced to over the last 2 years, I think, man, what a great thing, because we don't have to. Suppress the truth. And really that's kind of our first, like that's what the Great Commission was, is like, go out, spread the good news, and make disciples of men.
Sure.
And how do you do that without freedom of speech?
Right. Well, and I think one thing that's key in this is, while obviously America is America, we have our own culture and, Constitution and all that kind of stuff, I believe it's very heavily based on Judeo-Christian principles, because you look through Scripture, and I mean, what did Jesus come to do? To set the captives free. Yeah. It's about releasing people from bondage and setting them free. Yeah. Now, granted, in the Christian worldview, there's limits on that, because real freedom isn't just do what you want, it's do what God designed you to do. Well, and that's where thriving comes in.
Yeah, because, like, we're free from sin, but we're not free from everything. Like, we're free in Christ.
Right.
Which means that we're still under Christ,
right?
So there's limitations, and like true freedom comes in actual structure, not complete anarchy.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, no one's free in anarchy, because like your basic right to life is not protected. Like when violence,
that's the rule.
Right. When violence is imminent, like that's not a society anyone can thrive in.
But I think what's happened with the First Amendment is, like, I like how you say it, like there should be limits, in when looking at the First Amendment, because we do have a lot of people out there that are First Amendment advocates, but like they do so to like the extreme, saying like every form of speech, no matter what it is, should not be canceled and should not be suppressed. Mm-hmm. So if you wanna troll out on the internet in a really degrading way towards somebody, if you want to say some very hateful stuff, you're protected under the Free Speech Act. And nobody has really had a very convincing argument as to why.
But is it tolerated? Is it? I mean,
it feels like it is.
I mean, as a libertarian, I tend to agree with that. But there are limits, like obviously we've talked about, the classic can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
Sure.
Because that results in actual harm and
damage.
Once
the truth comes out that there was no fire, you can't reverse the consequences and the damage.
Right. Or if people are trampled to death or whatever, it's not like getting online and saying something mean and people have the option to like just not pay attention to it. And that's where the limits come in, is like when there's tangible damage, not just, oh, my feelings are hurt. Yeah. Or I'm offended.
Well, I mean,
because fortunately, there's no, amendment to have freedom to not be offended.
Well, I mean, you have people being, canceled, losing their jobs, losing money, having to relocate,
Sure.
go underground for saying stuff that's racially provocative or sexually provocative, or even something that's just strictly from the Bible. Like there's people that are, there's tangible results of people being offended, and again, coming back to your point of, words or actual violence.
Right.
People are having, popping up with PTSD diagnosis, self-diagnosis.
Sure.
Because they saw an offensive comment online or
Right.
spun it off in their head that it was offensive.
Right. In which case, what kind of society is going to survive if, we get PTSD over reading something? There's something to be said for resilience and just being an adult, But at the same time, and like you were mentioning something about that triggered something I'm saying. What was the last thing you're talking about?
I don't know. I have a short attention span.
Like a goldfish?
Yeah. Every trip around the bowl's a new trip. Well, thinking a little more on how do we react to free speech locally, and as Christian dads, and go for it.
I don't interrupt you.
No,
I
go for it.
Remembered. Okay. I think one of the nuances of this that I've seen bite conservatives in the butt is prior to big tech kind of censoring speech, there's this idea that like private companies can, yes, there's freedom of speech, the government shouldn't, which people usually think in terms of government. Mm-hmm. I heard one professor who is liberal, self-professing liberal, make a really good case constitutionally that the First Amendment isn't just isn't just towards the government. It's basically any gatekeeper of information it applies to. And because people were saying, well, Google's a private business, they can do what they want. As long as it's not the government telling them to censor, they can censor. And the issue comes up with, well, if you basically have a monopoly on a platform or information or news, and it's not the government, and you're still censoring, that's still a violation of First Amendment rights.
Yeah.
And people are saying, what are you talking about? It's a private company. You said that bakery, doesn't have the right to refuse, making a cake for a gay couple. Well, Google has the right to censor speech they don't like that doesn't fit their narrative. And it's totally different. It's entirely different.
Say more.
Well, because one, if you're looking at like the cake baker situation.
You're talking about the baker out in Colorado.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's been examples since then of basically
like
advocates,
forest,
advocates basically trying to find Christian places and make a stink and get them shut down, because it's different because it's a violation of conscience. If they just came in and said, hey, I like a cake, and we're flaming gay, they're like, okay, fine, we'll make you a cake. They're like, oh, we want a cake for our wedding to celebrate our wedding, then it's a violation of their, of their conscience because they're Christians and marriage is between a man and a woman ordained by God. Mm-hmm. That's different. That's not discrimination. That's a religious thing. Versus, I don't like Google saying, I don't like this conservative perspective. We're going to shut down anyone that doesn't agree with this approved narrative.
Sure, just
that's entirely
a
different.
Suppression.
Right. That's a violation of First Amendment rights. Because they're limiting perspective and they're shutting down. They're acting like China.
Yeah, for sure. And they're becoming more like state-run media. But I think where we all went wrong with this First Amendment and this like out of control, run amok freedom of speech stuff is God's not involved in it. God's not involved.
Say more.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, when you take the main ingredient for life out of life, and you exclude the author of existence and the author of speech, the author of all creation from the very created things that we are looking to engage in, and you say you're no longer in charge of this, we're in charge of this, then these things then end up exactly where they are: puzzle factories, Rubik's cubes that cannot be solved, and continue. Do you remember those finger traps?
Love those.
Yeah. So the harder you pull, the harder it is to get off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of what the freedom of speech thing has become. Like a finger trap. You're like, damn it. Okay, we're gonna try. The harder you fight against it, it
Sure.
holds you down more. So like with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution really only makes sense with God at the center of it.
Well, sure. I mean, even, I don't remember which founding father, one of them famously said, this Constitution, this country's not going to work without God.
Well, it's probably every one of them except Thomas Jefferson.
Well, he was a deist. He just wasn't a Christian. He definitely believed there's a higher power. It just wasn't called Jesus. So I mean, he might have been the one that actually said that, but it was.
We'll find that out for you guys.
But it was this idea that it requires a moral people, which I think is what Thomas Jefferson said. It requires a moral people for this to work.
And what's interesting on that argument is like, well, then where do you derive your morality?
Well, back then it was they assumed, well, obviously the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. But again,
even the deists were like, well, yeah, Bible.
Yeah, well, that was the greatest authority at that point, right? Now we live in a postmodern world where
sure, you make your own authority.
Everybody's God. Do whatever you're right. Moral relativism, not moral relativism.
Sure, moral
secular
relativism.
Humanists. I think. Yeah. 6 in one, half a dozen in the other.
Yeah, I mean, basically, there's nothing stitching society together anymore. It's a matter of time before it all falls apart, and it's just been accelerated with the mass adoption of critical theory. So.
I'm glad you got CRT in there. You figured a way to weave that in there. So, I mean, what do we do as dads? Like
hunker down, get some guns.
Is
that the right? Second Amendment. Woo! America.
Next episode, we're talking Second Amendment. What if we just went through all the amendments? That'd be kind of interesting.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, people would probably tune out after the Fifth Amendment.
I don't know, man. If you love America, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there we go. I'm going to get the Constitution tattooed on my belly.
Your belly.
So, I mean, as dads, we're just, we're, again, two backwoods dads in the Pacific Northwest. Backwoods. I mean, there's a lot of trees up there.
We're like frontwoods.
Frontwoods, all right. Frontwoods, sidewoods. We're just raising kids,
trying to
love our wives, and like how do we engage, the culture on this issue and show Christ and make a stand for truth, and
by not wearing your mask in stores.
I definitely try to do that. Mm-hmm. It did not work in a couple of places recently.
Yeah, restaurants don't like that.
They do not like that. Valley Village also does not like that.
Really?
Yeah.
You're more likely to get Hep C from their clothes than...
They don't mind people stealing. I was literally in Valley Village. I know this is a tangent, but I was literally in Valley Village.
Valley Village is a thrift store like Goodwill.
It's nationwide.
Are they?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Never mind. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Everyone knows Valley Village.
Yeah, they do. The same with Goodwill. But I was literally in Valley Village a couple weeks back, and I witnessed a guy. I was, near the back of the store where the emergency exit was, handful of stuff, just hit the emergency exit door and just run.
Really?
Yeah, and nobody, like...
Did he not get the memo that you don't even have to, like, run? You just,
He might not have TikTok.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's... You get on, like, the West Seattle Facebook page, and they're like, yep, I was at QFC today, guy just, armful of stuff, just walked out the door right in front of the employees. No one did anything.
Yeah, so I was in that experience. I was watching, and I was looking for like employees to do anything, and they just kind of like, it took 5 minutes for somebody to walk over,
like close the door.
The only reason why they were doing it was because the alarm was going off. They're like,
sure.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But then like this last week, I was in, and literally I was being barred from entry because I was coming in without a mask.
Oh, someone's standing in your way?
Yeah.
Was it?
It was an employee.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, a young female employee, which my hat was off to her a little bit, because I was like, I did not look like I was in a good mood that day.
Sure, she didn't know if she'd get stabbed by the homeless-looking guy.
Yeah, I had my big black leather jacket on, and my hood was up.
Yeah.
Like I hadn't got a lot of sleep the other night.
Looking like Wolverine.
Yeah, I was just like, get out of my way. But she stood up to me, and at any rate, I ended up putting a mask on, which I felt really crummy about, and then I took it off as soon as I got buyer.
So what does that say about our Christian witness? I mean, what do you think about that?
It doesn't. It's not one of my. It's not one of my prouder moments.
Okay.
And I felt I did. I felt bad about it. I felt like I had to go repent, and not to her, but internally.
Sure.
I did. I felt bad about it. Because I was like the whole time. I was like, oh man, I did not. If she knew I was a Christian, or somehow. Yeah. It wasn't good. But anyway, I mean, we're trying to raise our kids and engage in like truth, and there's going to be misinformation and disinformation no matter what. It doesn't matter what era you're going to be in.
Sure. Well, and I mean, the part of this conversation we haven't really talked about, I mean, specifically on like the COVID stuff, on vaccines, is this,
you said the V word.
I just said the V word. Hopefully it doesn't get transcribed and the YouTube will get canceled.
You will.
We'll get a COVID warning. Misinformation. Wouldn't that be funny?
Just counteract it with saying the name Fauci. That should counteract it. Fauci.
I love Fauci. Okay, we're good. The funny thing about this is that this idea that like information and facts are static, especially when it comes to science.
Oh, I know, right?
It's like the most unscientific way to approach things. Like there's no, if a scientist says like the science is settled, they're probably on the government payroll because they're not actually following science. Like that is the most unscientific thing you can say, is that you should, instead it would be what we know now is this.
Yeah.
It'll probably change because that's the nature of science.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, science said that the Earth was the center of the universe.
Right, and that was widely accepted. And like Galileo got locked in, the tower.
Right. He was a heretic.
He was a heretic, and then eventually they figured out, oh, wait a second, I think Galileo was right.
Right, and even, if people are honest, what we knew, quote, knew at the beginning of the outbreak versus what we know 2 years later is drastically different. And if people are still hanging on, saying that the recent data is misinformation, because I mean, let's face it, like often popular opinion or consensus is wrong. Like I as a rule of thumb, if everyone's doing it, it's probably the wrong thing to do.
Well, I mean, lies spread much faster than truth.
Sure, they're much more tantalizing,
Yeah, because they poke at our fears and they poke at our insecurities.
Sure.
And so when we see it a bit more mainstream, which might lead me into we haven't done this yet. I try to be consistent about it, but share a piece of scripture. Yeah, that might have to do with misinformation, lies, and most specifically the tongue. The tongue, which is kind of the mouthpiece for the heart. What's in our heart, right?
I've been doing this Bible in a Year devotional.
Yeah.
And one of them was, talking about that and brought up the scripture that the tongue, out of the mouth speaks the overflow of the heart. Mm-hmm. So the issue isn't what you're saying; it's what you're taking into your life that's filling your heart up.
That's good.
It's the core of you. That's the problem.
Yeah. And then how you then take things like First Amendments and cancel culture and interpret those through a jacked up heart.
Sure.
Okay, James chapter 3.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's solid.
Solid. What's James say?
James chapter 3, 4 through 6. You'll know it once I say it.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope you have it memorized by the time I'm done with it.
Okay.
Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. Woo. It's powerful words from James.
One thing we haven't really covered, I guess. Well, I don't know. I mean, how many hours are we going to make this episode?
3 or 4. 3 or 4.
Because I mean, I guess we haven't really made a distinction between, because we got freedom of speech, which is kind of the core of what we're talking about here, right? But then you've got the specific nuance of misinformation, like what the definition of that. And the danger is just labeling anything someone doesn't agree with or has a different narrative as misinformation. But that's much different than I know the truth and I'm intentionally spreading lies. I mean, that's a real definition of misinformation.
Yeah.
Is, psyops, psychological warfare, like leading people astray via propaganda. And those are two very different things. And they have more to do not with the content of the information, but with the motivation of the person spreading it.
You're talking about the heart and the tongue.
Talking about the heart, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of what that made me think of, is kind of the difference between I'm saying something that someone else that has more power than me disagrees with, and so it gets censored, versus I'm trying to create anarchy and spread a lie.
Mm. And I don't think that you can make a distinction. It's so hard to. I mean, I haven't been able to do it, but it's hard to know the hearts of people and what's really going. I just always assume the worst of people,
right?
And that people have deceit in their hearts. Like,
it's a good Christian stance.
Yeah. You're just broken and jacked up, and unless you've got Christ, then you're just broken and jacked up.
Right. Well, and I think humanly speaking, our tendency is to give ourselves a lot more grace and leniency, but assume the worst about others.
Yeah.
And that's how conspiracy theories work. That's.
Well, and this idea of, like, misinformation, and then people, knowing the truth and then deciding, no, I want to sow discord,
right.
And for power, corruption, and gain, whatnot. Like, it's hard to make those distinctions on what's the motive, what's going on there.
Right.
Somebody could be sharing information that they think is genuinely true, and it might actually be misinformation, and then people
Sure.
can be sharing misinformation when they know the truth, but they're like, I want to sow discord. It's like, you really need the Holy Spirit,
right.
to be able to give you wisdom in the sermon on, like, what is going on.
Sure.
Like, we can't hope to know the human heart or even our own hearts without the Holy Spirit.
Right. Yeah, and that's, I think, a key, because I know I myself, and I've talked about this before, my tendency is towards self-dependence. Doing things of my own strength, my own understanding, my own skills, power, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's key to bring it back to, really, we don't have any, real wisdom and discernment without the Holy Spirit, to a degree, So, we need to be leaning into that, like, what is truth, and I guess the challenge, not only for our listeners and viewers, but to us, to me specifically, would be not giving into the, I'm scrolling on Facebook and I agree with that, so I just immediately share it without vetting whether or not it's true, because it already agrees with my disposition, kind of that confirmation bias, being open and honest to, like, is this something, I gravitate towards because it's easy for me, it's convenient, that kind of thing. I'd venture to say that misinformation for most people is ignorance. It's not intentional misleading.
Sure.
And my temptation, I don't know if I'm right here, but my temptation is people in power, specifically government, their misinformation is more ideological and intentional because they've got a vested interest in a specific narrative, where I don't. Like, I don't gain anything from sharing one perspective over another, other than social standing, maybe.
There is more, I would say, on that theory, there is more tangibles that are gained from the government, in being able to control the narrative.
Right.
There's tangible monies, there's tangible power, there's tangible real estate, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I agree with that. So, again, we're not trying to solve anything here, and this, again, simply two guys in a backyard discussing high-level stuff, and hopefully you don't feel dumber after listening to this conversation. I've enjoyed it, personally.
I enjoy it too, but I kind of used to feeling dumb, so,
At least you're good looking, especially with that haircut.
I know, man.
Yeah, okay. I like it. You got nice and...
It's good.
Well, you want to wrap it up from here?
I don't know where to go from this.
Yeah. I think in a lot of other episodes we have this kind of call to action, like, do this, don't do that. And a lot of it's like, hey, love your family, be in the Word, love Jesus, be involved in your community, and show godly love, patience, kind, mercy, and engage in godly justice.
But this time you're going to say the opposite?
This time that will be there.
Okay.
But what I'm going to say is, don't be a Christian that hides out. Don't be a Christian that hides out.
Don't be a secret Christian.
This
isn't China.
This isn't
yet.
Yeah. You need to be a Christian that wants to engage in these issues, and this is a time where we can't sit back and we can't allow the truth. And I don't mean like, the deception that maybe governments are engaging in. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about gospel truth. We don't want to allow culture. We don't want to secede to culture. We don't want to acquiesce to culture. We want to be able to engage culture. We want to be able to love culture on these particular topics: cancel culture, First Amendment rights, freedom of speech. We want to be able to engage culture on a godly level.
So you're saying,
Yep.
Let our relationship with God and our Christian worldview inform our perspective of culture instead of the other way around.
Amen, brother.
Okay, just
Well
wanted to.
It's a nice, tight little elevator pitch.
It's good. Put a little bow on it.
Yeah. Bing. So do that. Do that. There's lots of other issues out there that will require complex thinking. Don't run from them. Seek godly counsel.
Counsel's good.
We are some of the most godly people around, so you can seek our counsel. I didn't get struck by a lightning bolt, so I guess it's true.
Yeah, maybe he'll wait till I leave. That'd be good. No more podcasts.
We're just down to one Christian on this podcast.
Going solo.
Hey, we love you guys. We appreciate you listening, and we appreciate you tuning in. We are, I think, in year 2 of this podcast.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That is crazy. So maybe 80 episodes recorded, not all 80 released. No, I'm sorry, not 80. We're getting near the 75 mark.
72. It says right there. On
72.
The notes.
72. So thank you again for all your support, and please like us.
Please like me.
We need a lot of validation.
I need a
lot of validation. But follow us on all the socials. You know the deal.
Yep.
Hit those subscribe buttons. Smash them if you will.
Smash them. Share it with your men's group.
Yeah, share them with your men's group. Share them with your pastor. If your pastor needs coaching and counseling, let us know. We're happy to do that.
You're happy to do that. It's not my forte.
No, you're a good counselor.
I'll drink with them.
That's counseling.
Okay.
All right. Until next time, we love you guys, and we're praying for you. Peace.
Oh, before we say goodbye, check out that sunset.
Boom.
Look at that sunset.
Pacific Northwest.
Oh, it's so pretty. Okay, goodbye.